But RFK Jr. is also one of the most dangerous purveyors of inaccurate information about vaccines that our country has ever seen. The HHS secretary oversees the CDC, the NIH, and the FDA. So basically, in human terms, our vaccines, our medicine, and our food. His nomination and confirmation would mean that the guy who founded one of the nation's most prominent anti-vaccine groups.
We are finally getting some positive news because Donald Trump finally got some negative news from a top Republican who he has hated for the longest time now. For the past couple of days, we have heard lots of discussions about potential recess appointments for those nominees to Donald Trump's cabinet who might be difficult to get through considering they have no qualifications. And by those nominees, I mean almost all of the nominees. This is the channel that Donald Trump was going to be using to backdoor in people like Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. But it seems like that's not going to happen. And we are going to get into all of that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, to hit that subscribe button, it goes a long way, and it really means the world to me now. Before we get into this piece of breaking news about a top Republican stabbing Donald Trump in the back, I want to hear a little bit of the incredible breakdown by Jen Psaki today about Donald Trump's cabinet nominees in this clip right here.
Did RFK Jr. produce some of the strangest headlines in the history of presidential campaigns? He sure did. Does RFK Jr. have a strange, is one way of describing it, penchant for carrying dead animals in his car? He sure does. But RFK Jr. is also one of the most dangerous purveyors of inaccurate information about vaccines that our country has ever seen. The HHS secretary oversees the CDC, the NIH, and the FDA. So basically, in human terms, our vaccines, our medicine, and our food. His nomination and confirmation would mean that the guy who founded one of the nation's most prominent anti-vaccine groups would be in charge of the agency that makes recommendations on vaccines. The guy who said he would stop research into infectious diseases would be in charge of the agency that studies infectious diseases. So that's what's coming on that front. And then there's Matt Gaetz, Trump's pick to run the Justice Department. Is Matt Gaetz one of the most clownish members of Congress? Of course he is. Was he previously investigated over allegations of sex trafficking a 17-year-old girl? He was. And even though he was never charged, that alone should, of course, disqualify him for any cabinet position, especially, the top law enforcement job in the country. But if he gets confirmed, a guy who has spread conspiracy theories about January 6th and championed the cause of the rioters will oversee all January 6th cases. The guy who has said he is ready to abolish all three-letter agencies from the FBI to the ATF will be in charge of those very agencies. So that's what's coming, part of what's coming, if Matt Gaetz is Attorney General. And then there's Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence. Is Tulsi Gabbard prone to say things like Putin, Zelensky, and Biden should have ended the Ukraine war by using, quote, the aloha spirit? She is, and that's pretty odd. But Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence, would mean an apologist for Vladimir Putin will oversee 18 intelligence organizations, including the CIA and the NSA. It means our allies would look at our intelligence services, potentially, and see someone at the top who has shown a greater fondness for dictators and our adversaries than our friends. And some of those allies will see someone they might think twice about sharing their own secrets with. We don't know. That's what's coming with Tulsi Gabbard atop our national intelligence services. And finally, there's Pete Hegseth, a veteran and a cable news host who has gone viral for axe-throwing mishaps and saying things like he can't remember washing his hands once over the last decade, which that is gross. But more recently, the headlines have revolved around a sexual assault allegation against him. And while he was never charged, his lawyer says he agreed to pay his accuser for a non-disclosure agreement. And yes, all of that, well, mainly the last piece, should be disqualifying on its own. But also consider the much bigger picture here again. His confirmation would mean someone who champions service members accused of war crimes would oversee our military. Someone who has said the military should not have women in combat roles will be in charge of lots of women in lots of combat roles. Secretary of Defense leads the largest organization in our government with millions of employees, including active service members, and a $900 billion budget. Their job is not at all to decide whether the military is woke or not, whatever that means. But that's what a Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, will see it as. So look, my point here is this. There's a lot of information coming at us fast and furious about all of these picks. maybe Trump is testing his power over Republicans in the Senate by putting these people forward, maybe. Or maybe he thinks that Matt Gaetz and RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth are the best people for these jobs. Maybe he thinks that. Whatever the motivation, we can't just focus on the latest shocking headline. And that shouldn't be the only messaging, because it's easy to assume these personal scandals will prevent them from getting these jobs. But with this Republican Party, we just can't count on that. So it's important to understand what could be coming and, of course, how it could impact all of your lives.
I wanted to play that incredible breakdown from Jen Psaki because we cannot get number to how crazy these nominees are. Just because Donald Trump appointed someone crazier doesn't mean the past nominee was not still crazy themselves. I feel like we have forgotten about how dangerous someone like Tulsi Gabbard would be at national intelligence. And we have to continue to remember that. But fortunately, we are seeing a little bit of light in the dark tunnel that is the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, because one of the top Republicans, who he has long hated, came out with some news that's going to devastate him in this article. Right here, Senate GOP head delivers unwanted message to Team Trump. Donald Trump on Sunday got a potentially devastating message from the Senate GOP leader, according to a report Trump prior to announcing his nomination of Matt Gaetz said Republican leaders need to be ready to consent to recess appointments to skip the process of confirmation, despite the fact that GOP just won the majority in the Senate. Republicans then elected John Thune to replace Mitch McConnell when he retires, and they left the door open to do just that. But over the weekend, McConnell himself spoke out on the issue and declared that there would be no recess appointments, meaning all of Trump controversial nominees would be vetted and receive a confirmation hearing from the Republican senators, according to a reporter. Jane Mayer, staff writer at The New Yorker, reported the development on social media on Sunday. Message to Team Trump: there will be no recess appointments, Senator Mitch McConnell said tonight at a Washington gathering. Mayer reported on social media just the news that Donald Trump does not want to be hearing, because as we saw a couple of days ago on Fox of all places from anchor Trey Gowdy, there are a majority of Republicans in the Senate who, although we don't know which nominee, I think we can assume that it's Matt Gaetz, said that they will not be voting in favor of his confirmation. And then you can also look at the dangerous selection of Tulsi Gabbard, the incredibly dangerous selection of RFK Jr. Pete Hegseth, with the controversies about him already coming out. These are individuals who have no place in the highest places in our government. And so the fact that Donald Trump might not just be able to ram them through an unconstitutional recess appointments as a means to evade the Senate, yeah, that is bad for Donald Trump. That is good for us. And although I don't want to be necessarily thrilled with something Mitch McConnell's saying, if he's pushing back against Donald Trump, a longtime foe of his within the Republican Party, although guess it's really just the party of Trump that is good for us. And it wasn't just the only pushback that we have seen from Republicans, because we saw Kristen Welker today give a little pushback to Senator Markwayne Mullin, and a clip that I want to check out right here.
Let's talk about President-elect Trump's pick for HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Of course, he has said he believes that no vaccine is safe and effective. You have been on the record defending the efficacy of vaccines. Are RFK's views on vaccines a deal breaker for you, Senator?
No, I absolutely appreciate Bobby Kennedy taking a hard look at the vaccines. There are some questions that had to be made, and I appreciate some of the scrutiny that's going through there. I think Bobby can answer all those. I've had multiple conversations with him. I've sat down and had long conversations with him, and I actually find the guy extremely intelligent when it comes to this stuff. And some of this stuff does raise a lot of questions. But I do got a question for you. The Democrats are spending so much time talking about the scrutiny of President Trump's picks, and yet did we spend this amount of time scrutinizing Biden's pick? I mean, we can talk about Rachel, the Assistant Secretary of HHS. I think that's a pretty controversial pick from whatever pronoun he or she decides to use. We talk about Sam, the Assistant Secretary or Executive underneath Secretary of Energy, And the individual was arrested multiple times for stealing luggage off of conveyor belts inside airports. And I didn't see this same type of scrutiny that the Democrats used on these individuals' picks. There's been a lot of picks. I mean, we can talk about Pete Buttigieg. Is he really qualified to be Department of Transportation? But I don't see the same people given the scrutiny here.
We scrutinize all of those picks robustly. But Senator, let me just go back to this, because you've been on the record saying that you do believe vaccines are safe and effective. You're not concerned about RFK Jr. overseeing the largest health agency in the land?
I have said that there's some positives to vaccinations. I've also questioned vaccines multiple times, and I think they should be questioned. For instance, why is America highest in autism? What is causing that? Is it our diet, or is it some of the stuff we're putting in our children's system? It used to be almost not even heard of. Then it went from 1 to 10,000, then to 1 to 5,000, 1 to 2,000. In some races right now, 1 out of every 36 kids by the age of 3 have developed some form of autism. What is causing that? And if it is the vaccines, there's nothing wrong with actually taking a hard look and finding that's what's causing it. Okay. Is it something else that we're putting in our systems? We do know we're not as healthy as we should be right now. We're the most developed country in the world, so all things should be on the table. And if that's scrutinizing vaccinations, then that is exactly where we need to go.
Senator, I just have to say, no credible expert or study has shown a link between vaccines and autism. So I just want to be on the record with that very quickly.
Exactly, but when we ask about the studies for the vaccines, Kristen, I know, but when we ask about the vaccines and the study that was done specific for autism, it's extremely vague. And in fact, there's not been a direct study on each individual vaccine if it has a possibility of causing it. They have an overall reaching view, and I've asked these questions because I sat on health in the House and on the Senate, and we have got almost no answers on that.
The confirmation process isn't only important for the possibility that Republicans could have a little bit of spine for the first time in their lives and actually vote against the wishes of Donald Trump, but it's important because it is an opportunity for us to show voters who Republicans are backing a dangerous conspiracy theorist like RFK Jr., who has cost lives overseas and at home with his rhetoric about vaccines, the lies he has pushed about science, the disgrace that is Matt Gaetz, the danger that is Tulsi Gabbard. They would have to back those people up in hearings and expose who they're really supporting to the entire country, while they want to pretend that they're focused on lowering costs, something they've never done. We really know what they're doing backing Donald Trump and their commitment to his cult, and only focusing on serving him instead of serving their constituents. And that is what's so important about these confirmation hearings that it looks like we're going to be having. And we are going to be covering all that on the show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around at the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.